double take. So, electro rifle barrel liner drill and sandpaper chambered pipe schedule based subcaliber adapters. Pipe can be made out of plastic as well as metal, and when you look up the information about pipe schedules, it's easier to find it from metals than plastics, and the plastics, not always, depending on the type, most of them do have the mechanical dimensions, the actual sizes you measure, that match metal type, pipe, and tubing, not type and pooping. Just, you'll get old someday. Shut up and stop laughing. Anyway, here we go. So, what you look up is you have to find out the outer diameters of pipes first. If it says it's half-inch, the outer diameter is literally 0.84 inch. If it's 3/8 inch, it's 0.675 inches. And quarter-inch pipe is really half-inch, and it's 0.540. And 3/4 inch pipe, if you didn't already know it, because I've said it a billion times, the outer diameter on it is almost exactly 1 inch, and it's 1.050 inches. And the next pipe up is 1.3 inches, and it's called 1 1/4. Because America. Actually, this is the same stupid standard everywhere. Some countries actually say you have to actually use one of the diameters. It doesn't matter which one. They always standard on the outside diameter because that's the easiest one to add threads to. If you change the thickness of it, if you wanted to create flow through a pipe that was reliable, you'd never change the inner diameter. But making them fit together would mean that each of them would have different outside diameters depending on pressure. And if you're going to a lower pressure, you'd want the diameters both to change. So it became logical mostly for gas movement, not water or fuel, but gas, for them to make the diameters different. And the number standards came originally because they decided to say, what kind of pipe is it? And at the time, the pipes had an inner diameter that was pretty regular. I'm going to give you one of my favorite examples for this. The 1 inch pipe is 1 inch on the inner diameter. And the 3/4 inch does have a kind of a matchup that's almost 3/4. What about half-inch pipe? What schedule is half-inch? Not a damn one of them. The closest one that comes to it is actually 3/8 inch pipe. Schedule 40, which would be considered standard, is actually half-inch inner diameter. I've given up. So what you end up doing is looking up these things. You make a little table out of them. Now, if you make a table out of them in Excel and hit the wrong button, or maybe the right one, you can force it to sort them by the inner diameters. So if you're trying to find a piece of pipe with a specific inner diameter, suddenly it's all solved. You just have to make sure it includes the schedule number and what it's called. Good example is half-inch pipe is called Schedule 5. Yes, this exists. And it's 0.71 inch inner diameter for some goddamn reason. And its outer diameter is 0.84. Now, I'm not going to do that Excel spreadsheet. Number one, because I'm angry as hell someone else didn't do it already. Number two, I'm obviously going to do the stupid Excel spreadsheet. Number three, I fucking hate Excel. So anyway, I feed in the information into an Excel spreadsheet and sort it, and then I'm going to screenshot it and never ever do this again. But there's so many dead entries, like Schedule 5 stops existing in some of these diameters. They're special order. And there's no standard for them because they're unusual. And half-inch pipe has a Schedule 5. 3/8 inch, which is less than half an inch, doesn't. 1/4 inch pipe doesn't. They have Schedule 10. There's also Schedule 30 that disappears eventually. And the Schedule 20, there's even a Schedule 100 apparently for very large diameter, like 8-inch diameter pipe. So anyway, welcome to my little world. But the fun part about all of this is the pipe diameter is called schedule. Sometimes, not always. Don't assume anything's going to be same. Sometimes transpose over to plastic tubing, plastic pipe. Tubing and pipe are measured differently. I know that. But if they say schedule, they're treating it like pipe. So you can get away with using the numbers that you can only seem to find for metal, and you'll have a good guess that you'll probably kind of sort of maybe, God help us all maybe, find plastic tubing the same way. If you're trying to make something out of plastic, which is the way you should build something first, this is the next stage in my series on making literally anything out of tubing and plastics. You start off with plastics because they're easier to work. You work out all the methods and your tooling for it. And then you get to do the metal version and spend 2 hours doing something that took you 10 minutes. No, really, it's seriously a pain in the ass to use hand-powered saws, and I really hate doing this. Sometimes the plastic's actually much more difficult than some of the metals, but usually it's not. Anyway, electro rifled, barreled, liner drilled, and sandpapered chamber pipe schedule based subcaliber adapter. Why is the video titled something along those lines? Or what can be milled down to fit inside of a 12 gauge as a subcaliber adapter, or the DIY flare gun cartridge video. I've already done a bunch of videos about this because one of the things about doing a flare gun is you have to get a dummy cartridge. You don't want to use a real one. You have to get a dummy cartridge that has all of the characteristics of every single one of them on the market. Like with a 1-inch flare gun, you're going to end up having to buy a bunch of cartridges that are weird. Some of them have weird shapes to them, and make sure your thingy will fit. If you want to make a universal flare gun, I've given up. I'm just going to mold the interiors of flare guns when I get my hands on them and make one. The 12 gauge one, because there's only one company, it's Olin Orion, is that you use a 2-inch standard 12 gauge shotgun shell, and then something you jam into it, if you, like I did, and you end up finding out that that thing that would jam into it ends up being a whippet cartridge, or maybe some CO2 cartridges. Don't ask me why. I've given up trying to find out where the history of this went. But the point is, to duplicate the plastic cartridge in orange plastic so that you could totally have this on a bandolier for your cosplay for PUBG, or just because you want to make them. I mean, you might want to make them because they're really ridiculously expensive. Reloading them is okay, but you could make a more durable one out of aluminum or better grade plastic, or you can make it out of see-through plastic, for instance, and that sort of thing. So I had to look it up, and I figured out, I can just use the gauging diameter. So what is the gauging for the base of a shotgun shell? We already have a couple of the numbers here. And what's the inner diameter? Now, the reason I'm doing this on this subject is it's the last of the PUBG stuff. 81 caliber, or 0.81 inch, is at the base of a shotgun shell. The rim is a different story. It's a different edge. It's 88.6, or 0.886 inches. So ideally, you would start off with a chunk of plastic or a hollow plastic tube that goes from 0.886 inches down to 0.81 when you grind it down, and then has the inner diameter. The inner diameter fits a AA battery. The integral barrel flare gun cartridge, the one you want to copy because that way it doesn't really look like a shotgun shell, uses a AA battery sized bore. Now, AA batteries go from 13.5 to 14.5 millimeter, or 53 to 57 caliber. It hovers around 55 caliber. It's over 50 cal. 14 millimeter is the nominal diameter that you want to shoot for. That'll work well enough, and if it's not the right size, you get a different schedule or whatever with a different diameter. So the first thing you look up is the pipes that'll fit into a shotgun barrel that you can mill down out of plastic, because we don't want to do metal first, or maybe ever. And this would also make it to where you can make subcaliber adapters for different kinds of bullets if you want. And yes, I'm going to make a spreadsheet where I feed in all the data, shoot me, and then I'm going to sort it by inner diameter, not outer diameter, because why did they do, and then I'll be able to tell, you'll have a cross-reference spreadsheet that actually tells you what pipe to start with. When in doubt, you either want to make the inner diameter match whatever you're going to put into it. Let's say you're making it fire 22. You either want it to be the bullet diameter or the cartridge diameter. When it comes to shotgun shells, the safest thing to do here, like with a 410, that's the only other thing I can think of, would be to use the base diameter. So that's also the reason you're doing this as a subcaliber adapter. So here we go. And also, we have the inner diameter. It's supposed to be about 55 caliber. So what is the pipe diameter that would fit a little too big for a shotgun cartridge so that we could mill it down to shape like one, so it'll get stuck in there a good way so we can use it as an adapter, and also making a flare gun cartridge, because that's what we're really doing here. I don't think you want to use super glue to make a real shotgun shell, but gluing the plastic would work just fine for this. And you'd end up with probably a functioning flare gun cartridge, but definitely a cosplay toy. So, the outer diameter of a 3/4 inch pipe is too big, but you could use it. I'm not going to bring that up. Milling to the minimum. The outer diameter of a 1/2 inch pipe, there are other diameters, but 1/2 inch is the most commonly available one, and it's the one that shows up next. So we're going to do that. Its outer diameter is 0.84 inches. Now, it's not 88.6 like we need for a rim, but it is bigger than the 81 caliber chamber, or 0.81 inch inner diameter of a shotgun bore. So it's definitely the first starting point. And it goes from Schedule 5, that's 0.71 inches internal diameter, all the way to 0.252 inches for extra, extra strong beyond Schedule 160 pipe that I don't even know if you can get anywhere. That's basically a chunk of metal with a hole drilled in it that's a little over 25 caliber. It could be a 25 ACP sub-adapter, but main thing about it is you've got a huge dynamic range. Now, what's the closest one to 55 caliber? So you can get a piece of plastic instead of metal, mill it out easily, plug the back end, and make your little cartridges. Or, stick it to the man and not spend $5 per cartridge making a flare cartridge. And you want to start off with a piece of pipe very close to the same diameter so it's smooth already, so you don't have to sand everything. That would be a pain. So what do we get? Well, the closest one isn't. We don't get one that's 55, but we do get close. Schedule 80 half-inch pipe has an inner diameter of 0.546. Now that's right on the cusp of being the right diameter. Hopefully it's a little too small. Actually, you want that, or exactly the right one. I don't know. I don't have the time to go find it. But Schedule 80 half-inch pipe can be milled into a reasonable facsimile of what looks like a 12-gauge flare gun cartridge that has an integral barrel that's orange, that's this long, that literally is orange and says, "Don't shoot me." You can find plastic tubing like that and it should work. But that brought up some other questions, because that's also very close to the same diameter to put in a 1/4 inch pipe loosely, or a 3/8 inch, to where you'd have to mill it a little bit, and you can use it for the next size down, 3/8 inch, which has an outer diameter of 0.675 inches. Now this makes it where you can nest them within each other, and in case of plastics, makes it real easy for you to use acrylic glue and keep nesting them within each other and make a chunk of plastic out of it that's a different diameter. And then that one has an inner diameters that I'm going to list below as well. Now, why is this useful and why did I name it subcaliber adapter? Well, because the flare cartridge is really just a subcaliber adapter for a slug that's really small. They made it a very specific design so that all the pressure is contained within this thing, so that it wouldn't rely on the gun doing anything, and you'd replace the barrel by literally throwing out the empty cartridge, and the flare gun pistol would have a longer warranty period. They were declared to be safety equipment and durable goods, and they didn't want them to have a timeout limit or a you have to get rid of it and get a new one. That would be excessive, since they're required on boats at one time. So they decided, let's just move over to these cartridges and not use 12-gauge 2-inch shells. And eventually they were supposed to switch over to something that would never take a shotgun shell, but they never did. I guess to support legacy purposes. But anyway, you could also make this in metal and make a really durable version. And yeah, because it's containing everything, like a little tiny muzzle loader, it's got a primer in the butt, gunpowder, and a projectile, it would be a lot like firing a safe version, quasi, to fire a bullet. Now, I have to remind everybody out there that looked up 3D printed guns or whatever, if you were looking and you found this video, that's basically the tactic that's going to end up happening if you make 3D printed guns, where the ammunition is its own barrel, and it literally contains all of the pressure, where you have a primer that you shove in muzzle loader style so it can't put any pressure backwards. You might end up with that kind of thing. And because of that, this may actually be useful. And again, I did a video where I talked about turning a flare gun into something that takes only a muzzle loading cartridge, because it doesn't have the ability to fly apart. You could permanently mount something like this in there and use it as a plug, so that the thing only has just a firing pin going through to hit some sort of primer. Anyway, there'll be examples below, like the 410 cartridge and the 4570 government cartridge and the 50 BMG cartridges, where there's a whole plethora of metal tubing that you'd have to use for either starting point to make a barrel or to make a subcaliber adapter to stick them into something else. Because that's something I looked up today, so I'll just include the links to it. But I'm going to attempt sometime to make a full spreadsheet. Yes, I'll publish it. And just an easy look-up imager with a photo, screen grab of the same thing, not in Excel, obviously. Well, it'll be some other program like it, where I sort everything by inner diameter to make it easier for you. Someone else already did a lot of this work. He wrote a book. Let me get that up on the screen real quick. Ronald B. Brown's 1986 book, Homemade Guns and Homemade Ammo. He did this because he wanted people to be able to make guns and pistols and whatever out of whatever was around. Apocalypse fanfic. Anyway, you can look that up as well. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.